so much. That was absolutely fabulous. I feel really energised by that. It's really encouraging and hopeful that you've really given us some sort of concrete pointers and ways to move forward. So even though we had to wait to the end of the day for it, hope it wasn't too painful for you guys to wait for it, but it was wonderful for us, and thanks very much. Has anybody got any questions? Yes.
I should warn everyone that I usually always have a question. I was really interested in, and thanks for a great presentation. I've got lots of ideas. My mind's going in 3 different directions. But interested in one of the sort of points that was made around trauma being, core work for mental health services, and thinking too around, I suppose, some of the tensions specifically around addressing child sexual abuse and sexual assault, sexual violence. And I suppose some of my observations, say, for example, between the domestic violence sector and the sexual assault sector, is that there is a sense even within the domestic violence sector that sexual violence is a specialist area. And so that if a woman discloses sexual violence within an intimate partner relationship and intimate partner violence, they sort of have a reaction of, no, that's not us. Thank you for disclosing, but here's the number to call, or we'll refer you on. And it seems to me that there maybe is a bit of a tension between, on the one hand, well, I mean, I'd be interested in your thoughts about this, about making trauma informed care and the impacts of trauma core focus for mental health services, and yet at the same time I'm sort of wondering, well, what role do you see for the expertise that sits within the sexual assault services, particularly around perpetrator tactics, around the ways in which victim survivors are invited to become complicit in their victimisation, to use Judith Herman's terminology, to become a willing victim, that's the kind of purpose of perpetration, and also the sort of socio-political context in which victim survivors are forcibly silenced in various ways collectively by all of us. I was just sort of wondering, where do you see, thinking about partnerships, what that might be, what that might look like?
I'll have a long answer in the morning. I'll just give you a short answer. Whether we know it or not, responding to the impacts of trauma has always been core business for mental health services. We just haven't known it or called it that. But that's what mental health services have. They've been offering care, but perhaps it's not the right kind of care to people who've experienced trauma in their lives. So maybe now it's just time to kind of call it core business. And there's to some degree, we all have to be skilled in the system. It includes peer workers and how to respond to a disclosure. I think that's critically important. So some things are critically important that we all can do. That's core business. We understand something about perpetrator tactics, absolutely something about how to respond to disclosure appropriately, whether that's in an emergency room or an inpatient service or a community health centre or a women's health centre. I'll borrow Deborah's metaphor about the spade, no spade. There'll always be a place for specialist trauma-specific services as a part of a trauma-informed care system. But working in a trauma-informed care system, I may never use that spade. I may never dig and provide trauma-specific services about how the past connects directly to the present, but I'm aware because I'm trauma-informed and therefore I approach you differently and I understand you differently. I don't have specific thoughts on how specialist sexual assault services fit in. I agree, but there's...
No, that's a curveball, sorry.
Yeah, and just to acknowledge, obviously, that the partnerships need to go across, we need to be all talking together a lot more and connected with our local kind of sexual assault services and know who they are by name and, that all of that kind of grassroots really staying connected with each other, which I think, again, often comes down to individuals at the moment, doesn't it? It doesn't really kind of, if a certain person leaves, then you kind of lose contact with that service. And we need to kind of build in those partnerships in a more real way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to add on to that, it seems to me that one of the wonderful things today is that people are using the word trauma and not the word abuse. And I think as soon as we start using the word abuse, people associate it with sexual abuse, which is just one tiny area of childhood trauma. And I think that what you've been talking about, and most people, is the fact that we're talking about childhood trauma. We're talking about all forms of trauma, neglect, abandonment, emotional abuse. And when we just think about, start talking sexual abuse, we talk specialised services. And I think that puts fear in mental health professionals. And I think we can take that fear away by broadening it and making it something that people can much more readily understand when we talk of childhood trauma. And I think, therefore, the use of trauma as this conference is a really, really important way forward. We started recognising trauma by the feminist movement in the 70s, talking about sexual assault and male perpetrators, and I think we've now moved beyond that into recognising trauma is not gender specific and it's all forms of trauma. I just like your thoughts and comments, but that's why I really loved what you and everyone else has been saying, because you're talking about trauma-informed care and therefore trauma healing. I think everybody can be involved in, all mental health professionals.
Yeah, I think the other thing is it goes back to that idea that if we're trauma-informed, you know, whether the person articulates trauma as part of their story or not, we're still responding in a way that is experienced as more healing and helpful than if we don't. So I think that's probably the other reason why a broader framework, certainly for general services, works really well, because, you know, we're kind of responding to everyone with that same kind of empathic, related connectedness. That's actually good, like I said before, it's good for everyone and it's good for workers too.
Yeah, this is, it's a question, but it's a question maybe for all of us. I've spent 25 years developing educational programs, which we then called educaring, and it's a whole different, what I call an Indigenous critical pedagogy of healing or hope or healing. We had it in the university. We've just had a whole new VC, and he's decided he wants to do a whole different thing. I own the intellectual property of my work, so I was going to gift it to the university, the masters and the diploma. And within the last week, they've decided that they'll keep the masters, but they want to get rid of the diploma because it costs too much. The model we work on is that when the students come in, they need support themselves. We call it personal and professional development. So they want to get rid of the diploma. And so it's sitting there. At this moment, there's a law firm developing the whole intellectual property around it, and I've decided to pull it out. How do we create a dialogue with government, with the education institutions? Julia Gillard was the Minister for Education when she decided that Aboriginal people actually should only go to TAFE to get the skills to work with children who are now sexually assaulting smaller children. Her department decided that. I can't believe that. But how do we start to get an understanding within education institutions that you don't sit a whole group of people in a classroom and talk at them and then, you know, graduate them as psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers, and then they find out over 10 years or so that how to work properly with people on the ground. I want us to think about that. Maybe you can talk about it, because I just don't know how we engage with the system to get it to really be accountable for the decisions it's making.
Oh, look, I mean, all I can say is
out
that...
there, by the way.
Yeah, look, I'm looking at Marinda. She's in complete agreement. I mean, what you say is right, and probably we just need to, I don't know, join forces more and connect across those different organisations and universities and start to share those ideas and maybe also look at alternate ways of progressing those ideas as well, that they don't have to be within the traditional institutions. So, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, let's go and have a drink, hey? Thanks, everyone.